I'm Maggie Dale, and I've been working with children for over 30 years as a school teacher and as homeschool consultant. In the 80s, I was teaching missionary children in a school for missionary children in Madrid, Spain, and I noticed that there was a reading specialist that came to our school once a week to work with the children. And I thought, there must be a better way, because these children could use help each and every school day. And so I began training to become the special needs person at that school. And that culminated in my receiving a master's in special education. So for many years, I used the skills that I learned. I moved to Washington State and married my husband, and we began working with homeschoolers. And I realized after a while that a lot of the tools that I had been using were not really fixing the problem, but really just accommodating for those difficulties. And so I began looking for more tools to help children. And about that time, someone from my church invited me to a seminar, much like you're viewing now. And I learned about the neurodevelopmental approach. And I realized that at that point, that homeschooling parents can work with their children throughout the day in short, frequent activities or times and help their child actually overcome their learning difficulties and maximize their child's learning potential. So to this afternoon, I want to share with you some of the steps and some little clues that you can work on to begin the process of using the neurodevelopmental approach to help your children. The first stage of learning is receiving. We receive information through all of our senses: vision, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. All of these senses impact learning. We think of hearing and vision the most, but the others impact learning as well. So the first step, sometimes we suggest, well, you should get your children's eyes checked or the hearing checked. And the vision acuity, visual acuity, and hearing acuity may be just fine. Acuity means that the ears hear well. But there's other steps that have to be considered, and that's under the general category of perception. That means how the brain works with the eyes and the ears and the other senses to process information. And so once we look at the receiving and see that those things are working properly, then we go to the processing session. And that processing has to do, again, with how the brain works with the different organs, the different senses, to interpret the information that is being received. So as we look into the processing, we see that other ways to talk about that is short-term memory, the information that we want to come in, use, and then we don't need to remember it any further. And we could also think of it as attention. Now, a lot of people have trouble with paying attention. They can't keep all the pieces of information long enough to actually use that information. So if a child has trouble with phonics, following directions, attending, then there is usually an auditory processing problem. And so one of the ways that we look into to check the auditory processing is using cards like this or like this. And what you do is to read these cards off to your child. They don't see it because this is an auditory test. At 1 second intervals, a steady tone. 4, 0, 2, 1, 5. Then you ask the child to repeat those. If they can't get 5 digits, as I've read, then you go back down to 4 and keep finding or going up. What you want is 2 out of 3 correct responses the first time, and then you can go up to the next level and then do 6 digits. 1, 0, 5, 4, 9, 7. You want your children to say these back to you without chunking or chaining, and because both of those ways are ways to cheat. Now, that's a little cute way of saying that. Chunking and chaining is cheating. They're not intending to do that because in our society we're taught to use mnemonic devices to help remember. And yet the better way is to develop the skill of being able to remember multiple digits. In our society today, the average 2-year-old can remember 2 pieces of information. Let me back up. The average 1-year-old can remember 1 piece of information. How do we do that? Do we do digits for them? No. For a 1-year-old, we say, touch your nose, touch your ear. And we do this without even thinking about developing their short-term memory. When they become 2, they should be able to do, the average person should be able to do 2 pieces of information. 3-year-old, 3, on up to 7. And that's where we bottom out. All the way from 7 years old to adulthood, 7 is the average. If you've ever read or heard the documents of our founding fathers, you will know that they had humongous sentences. And when they had speeches, they stood there for hours and people were able to attend. Their auditory processing was much higher than 7. And so there's no reason to stop at 7. We encourage the children and the individuals that we work with to move beyond 7 and to increase their auditory processing. And as that happens, their processing improves, their speech patterns improve, reasoning skills and the ability to understand cause and effect improves, and social skills. Just imagine, if a person is involved in a conversation and they can't remember all the pieces of the conversation, their answers or their responses are not necessarily going to be appropriate. And then someone's going to think, that person wasn't paying attention, or they're weird. And so they're going to respond to that, and so the social skills are going to be affected. So to test, remember, you go through the digits, you find out where they are, and then suppose a child can do 5. So that means you need to work on 6s, 6 digits. So you read off the digits, and you can read them up to 3 times while you're training them. When you're testing, you want to just to see what they can do for the first time. But in training, you can read the digits, same series of digits, up to 3 times. Or you can do bridging. They can do 5s, so you read off 5 digits, and then the second time you add a 6th digit. You read the same 5 plus a 6th one. And so that kind of helps them bump up to the next one. Now, it doesn't have to, each of these digits represent a developmental year, but it doesn't have to take a year if you're working on it. But it will take some time and consistency. You should do this like for 2 minutes, 2 or 3 times a day, 5 days a week, to be consistent and to see the progress that you want to see. You can do this visually as well. In this case, you would either show the digits for 3 seconds, take it away and have them repeat, again, 2 out of 3, or you can flash digits 1 second at a time. Again, you find out how many they can do. 2 out of 3 is good. Move up to the next digit and keep going until they can't do it anymore. Again, you train them the same way. You show them the digits for 2 to 3 minutes, 2 or 3 times a day, and you develop these skills. Preschoolers, visual processing, preschoolers that have difficulty recognizing their numbers, letters, and words, and older students that have problems with math, spelling, and visual attention, as well as picking up visual information and eye contact are things that you would see difficulties. And so before you work on digits, you can use objects for visual. You can show them objects, pictures of objects, or you can actually show them objects. You can lay them out on the table and show them. And for the very young, you can ask them to tell you what those objects are so that you know what they're going to call them. And then you maybe cover them up with a towel or some surface, and then you say, what was here, what was here, what was here. They tell you, and then you do the same thing. So that's how you work on visual and auditory processing, a very important skill in learning.